All right, turn your Bibles, if you would, with me this evening to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, you find a place to go ahead and stand. I know it's not a passage we turn to often. I'll give you a moment longer than usual, but Ecclesiastes chapter 1. As we go through the message, we're going to kind of flip around a little bit through the book of Ecclesiastes. I'll try and give you a moment or two at each one of those to be able to find your place. I think it'll help us out to be able to grasp what's going on in this book and in this passage this evening. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 1, it says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? Our one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after." And I'll go ahead and stop there. Like I said, we're going to look at some more as we go through this. We'll stop there for now, and let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I pray that you will bless this evening, Lord, the time we can have in your word. Pray, Lord, that you will speak through me, Lord. I pray that you will use this time, Lord, and use me this evening. I pray this in your name. Amen. Sunday night, I preached out of Psalm 23 and made comment of it being a really familiar passage, one we're all super common, or one we're all super familiar with and is common to hear. Ecclesiastes is just about the opposite of that. It's one that isn't preached often, and I think simply because it's very complicated. You read Ecclesiastes 1 through 11, and you can very easily read that entire thing and come away saying, what in the world did I just read? What you're talking about? And setting and rivers running into the sea and it not being full and they're going somewhere. And I mean, what in the world did I just read? It's complicated. There are some books of the Bible that as you read them and as you preach them, things just kind of jump off the page at you. Genesis has one amazing thing after another. One amazing thing after another that just seem to jump out at you as you study it. The book of Daniel and some of those books have great things happening that jump out at you and are easy to glean some insight from. The Gospels, you're looking at the very life of Christ. You have Jesus teaching people, so it's easy to see some truth that applies to us, to our lives. There are some books that are just that way, and there's an obvious message that applies directly to us, and then there are others that we very often tend to avoid because, again, it's confusing. It takes some pretty serious time and thought put into them to be able to understand it, especially when we're reading them in our devotions or something like that. And then to be able to apply it to our lives can be difficult. So often we skip over those because we don't want to put the work into it. We want to be able to just, I think a lot of times we want to be able to kind of check off our list. Yep, I did my Bible reading today, without having to really invest ourselves in putting work in it. Right now in my personal Bible reading, I'm wrapping up tomorrow, I believe, the book of Isaiah, which is one of those books that there's some parts of Isaiah where it is things just jump off the page at you, and there's other parts that it really takes some work to figure out what you're reading, to really grasp it. Ecclesiastes is one of those books that we look at, and again with me, where we started tonight, you have Solomon. He's starting off by vanity of vanity, all his vanities. I mean, that's a start your writing. I mean, that's some gloomy. I would like it if I got up here tonight and spent the entire message talking about how terrible my life has been. My week has been awful. If I got up here and start with, let me just tell you, let me take the next 30 minutes to tell you how bad my week has been. No one would like that. So we read the first chapter, we see him get up, and the very first thing is vanity of vanity, all his vanities, and we mentally kind of shut down. So this message is one took some thought and study, but I think it really has potential to be helpful to us. And I want to start out by I guess taking a real brief amount of time to explain the book of Ecclesiastes, just a little, and then we'll go through the message tonight. And it ties back into our series of seeing God in everything. The majority of Ecclesiastes is human reasoning. A lot of what we're seeing in chapter 1, we'll see it as we go through there, is how we as humans view things, how we see our trials and how we see our problems. It's how we think. And what we're gonna see tonight are probably, I guess, not things we would often vocalize, but are more than likely something that's gone through our mind. Here's what Solomon is doing. Solomon is being very open and transparent. He's explaining what goes through his mind as a man, which is often a good thing for us to see, because very often we put Bible characters on some sort of pedestal higher than we are. They aren't. They're people like you and I, who had up days and down days, who dealt with depression and with a sin nature. They were people just like we are, and they're people who allow God to use them. So what we're seeing here is Solomon, who had, as we know, God-given wisdom and thought like you and I. His human reasoning was no different. So kind of with that as the background, I want to get into the message tonight. Human reasoning, point number one, human reasoning, or with human reasoning, there is no point. There is no point. Human reasoning tells you it doesn't really matter what you do with your life, because none of it serves any purpose anyways. It's why so many people live their lives kind of doing that, whatever feels good to them in the moment, because it really doesn't matter anyways. And do whatever will bring them pleasure right now, right at this moment, because they see it as, well, there's no purpose in life, so I just need to get what I can. There's no purpose or no reason, so I'll just live the best life I can while I can. There are phrases that have been made popular, like live in the moment, and others like that just have the mentality of get what you can while you can. And they're all teaching the same worldly reasoning, that there is no ultimate point in life, so just enjoy what you can, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. That's what we're seeing from Solomon. Solomon says all is vanity in verse 8. You know what vanity means? And I'm not talking, vanity like somebody staring at themselves in a mirror. Vanity means empty. Empty. Solomon is saying, by man's wisdom, by human reasoning, left to our own thinking, life is empty. Left to our own human thinking, life is empty. That it doesn't matter what you do. It'll always feel like there's something missing. Human reasoning, it doesn't matter what you have, you're always going to feel like you're missing something. That's why people buy excessively. They feel like, well, there's something missing in my life, so they'll buy things to try to fill that hole, and they enjoy that for a while, but it's not long before that feeling of empty is back, so they have to get something else, and the cycle just continues. Or for some, that feeling of empty means they chase relationships, that they feel like, well, there's something missing in my life, so I need to find, instead of something, I need to find someone who will fill that spot, which masks the problem, but then that feeling comes back and they run from that relationship to try and fill the void with another. By human reasoning, life's empty. There's a void. By human reasoning, nothing satisfies. I know we didn't read this far, but verse 12 and 13, I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, it is all vanity and vexation. It goes on to explain, if you continue reading through there, the pleasure and riches that he had don't satisfy. But they aren't enough. Talks about he's all that he has in verse 14, all this vanity and vexation of spirit. None of it satisfies. I'm not going to have us look there right now, but chapter 2, he talks about all that he has amassed and all of his things. And he said, didn't fill the hole. Material things don't satisfy. Gathered worldly wisdom, and it's worthless. No, just doesn't satisfy. Worldly wisdom says that some sort of religion has to try and satisfy. There's this hole in my life, it's empty, and nothing will fill it. I once saw an object lesson on this exact idea, and the guy who brought the message, I don't remember now who it was, but I remember his object lesson. But he brought a bucket to the pulpit, and the bucket had a hole drilled out of the bottom of it. So he filled the bucket with water, and if you're pouring more water in faster than it leaks out, the bucket will fill up. The bucket did fill. It was full, but then it drained down again. And his lesson in it was this: we pour things into our life, thinking, well, I need to fill this hole, so we pour things in, and it satisfies for a while. It fills the bucket, but it's only for a short time, and it drains back out when we feel that empty again. That's what happens when we try and fill it by man's reasoning. But for that short time, it feels like, man, I'm full. And then it empties back out again, and it's empty. By man's reasoning, nothing satisfies. By man's reasoning, there's no profit to life. Turn over with me to chapter 5 real quick. We'll look over there, verse 13 through 15. It says, there is sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely riches kept for the owners thereof are hurt. Those riches perished by evil travail. Yet of the son there is nothing in his hand. As he came forth of his mother's womb, naked shall he return to go as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor which he may carry away in his hand. There's no profit to life. He goes on to explain the negatives of riches, that you spend your entire life gathering wealth and you die in it. Some saying is, by human reasoning, there's no point. Enjoy what you can of life while you can. By man's reason, there's no, just do what you want. Isn't that a real positive first point here? There's no point. By man's reasoning, number 2, worldly wisdom is the best you can do. Because there's no point to life anyway. It's empty. There's a hole. It's all draining out. It can't be filled. You lose it all when you die by worldly wisdom. So the best a man can hope to do is learn a few things to make his time here a little more comfortable. And honestly, I know people who think this way. That they don't believe in anything, or at least they say they don't believe in anything after death, and they think, well, when you die, you just stop existing. So to them, there's no God, there's no purpose. Life is just simply what it is. So just make it as comfortable as you can. Learn what you can to get by. Learn what you can to have as much success while you're here as possible, because that's it. Solomon gives us some things that I've just kind of summed up into, or as worldly wisdom. Here's the idea with it. If you want to get by, what this is saying, if you want to get by, learn a few things. What worldly wisdom says, if you want to get by, learn a few things. Gain some wisdom. I love survival type things. I would never do it for many reasons, but there, I guess, still is a show called Alone. Brother Jansen and I have talked about it at length. To me, I think it's painfully boring to watch, but the idea was that people were put in the wilderness to survive alone, hence the name, which most people can't handle, the idea of being alone. To me, that I like being alone, so I'd be okay with that part. But survival type situations to me are fun. I was talking to Lisa about that earlier this week. Actually, we were camping, and just about everything that she said she wished she had, I pulled out of my backpack, because I just prepare for those sorts of situations. I enjoy those sorts of things. But there's only one way to survive a survival situation, and that is if you've learned a few things before it. If you've never learned how to survive in the wilderness, you're not going to be able to. You have to have learned a few things. A person won't know how to stay alive in the middle of nowhere for any extended period of time unless they have learned how to do it. Solomon is saying, from a man's point of view, if you're going to survive this life, you need to learn a few things. I divided what he tells them in two different ways. Learn wisdom to obey. Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 1. Who is a wise man, and who knoweth the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom maketh his face to shine, and the boldness of his face shall be changed. I counsel thee to keep the king's commandment. And in that regard, of the oath of God, be not hasty to go out of his sight, stand not in an evil thing, for he doeth whatsoever pleaseth him. Where the word of the king is, there is power, and who may say unto him, what doest thou? Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. Very, very simple advice. Figure out who is in charge. He mentions the king, and do what he says. Obey. I'll relate this to current events. You think of all of the media build up about police brutality and those sorts of things. I'm going to give some really simple advice. Do what the police officer tells you, and he won't be forced to yank you out of your car. I mean, that I know that's not popular opinion right now, but it's truth. I get, that there's. I really debated saying this. I get that there's racism and that happens. I do. I understand that. I'm kind of, my wife and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, from both sides. I find it interesting. I have had it personally from both sides. I have had it where I've had one side call me white trash, and I've had it where I have the other side assume I am Hispanic, but I'm not Hispanic, so I can't be accepted in that side either. So, I mean, I've dealt with my share of racism pointed at me, especially on job sites. Some of the things that I've dealt with, and I get that that's a thing. But I also understand that if I don't do anything to cause a police officer to pull me over in the first place, then I'm not going to get yanked out of my car. Verse 5, whoso keepeth the commandment shall, how does it say? I have it written down wrong here. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing. This isn't a difficult thing here. Solomon says by man's wisdom, you just do what you can to survive. The best way to do that is to figure out who's in charge and do what they say. When my dad was the executive vice president of Pacific Coast, being in California, and we traveled basically every weekend at that point for him to preach out and to kind of promote the college, which meant some interesting experiences for my brother and I. Nearly every service, Bo and I were at a different church, which meant dealing with some less than nice kids in classrooms, sometimes less than nice teachers in classrooms, and I figured out a way to survive with minimal issue. I figured out I was in the class and just stay out of that person's way. What Solomon is saying. So Solomon says, man's reasoning says, if you want to figure out how to survive, what Solomon is saying. So Solomon says, man's reasoning says, obey. Then gain wisdom to life. Chapter 7, I know we were in chapter 8 just a minute ago, chapter 7, verse 14, he says, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity consider, God also hath set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. All things have I seen in the days of my vanity. There is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prolongeth his life in wickedness. Be not righteous over much, neither make thyself over wise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? Be not over much wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? It is good that thou shouldest take hold of this. Yea, also from this withdraw not thine hand, for he that feareth God shall come forth of them all. Wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in the city. For there is not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. Also take no heed unto all words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee. For oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise hast cursed others. Worldly wisdom says to survive, gain wisdom to life. And I'm going to take this and simplify it a lot. Here's what Solomon is doing. He's giving very practical advice to life. It's simply this. If you want to survive, figure out the basics. Figure out the basics. And that's what worldly wisdom tells us. Now, I have tried to talk really fast to get through all of that because the first 2 points were bringing me to where I really wanted to preach, which was the third point. Solomon goes through all of this, talking worldly wisdom through this whole thing, over and over, pointing out that life is pointless. Over and over, pointing out that the best we can do is just learn a few things to make survival a little more comfortable. And then right as he gets to the end of the book, his attitude changes. Turn over with me, if you will, to chapter 12, verse 8 through 14. All of a sudden, we see a shift. Starting in verse 8, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. Then verse 9, moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yea, he gave good heed and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find out acceptable words. That which was written was upright, even words of truth. The words of the wise are as goads and as nails fastened by the masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. And further, by these, my son, be admonished. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. He goes through 11 and a half chapters of human reasoning, and all of a sudden the attitude changes to, but God is the solution. Life is pointless. Life is empty, and there's nothing we can really do but just try and survive it. But God's the solution. If you don't want a life that's pointless, God's the answer.
Yes.
If we don't want a life that is empty, nothing but vanity, don't fill it with things. Don't fill it with relationships. Fill it with God. If we don't want a life that is unsatisfying, fill it with God. If we don't want a life that's just survival until the day you die, God's the answer. In these last two verses, Solomon gives, I think, three things that, I just have it worded this way, three things that God is. And I'm going to take them out of order for the purpose tonight, but three things that God is that makes him the answer. The first is God is the judge. He says that in verse 14, for God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Verse says every work, everything that you do, God sees. The things that they don't want anyone else to know about, whether that's good or bad. The things that no one else is aware you do. And more than just knows, judges it. That ought to change the things we do. It really should. You know, I can see a person just doing whatever feels right if he thinks to self. You know, I can understand a person doing whatever just feels good to them if there's no authority. That's what we have, or that's what I don't know what I was trying to type there. I tried to glance over and catch it. Yeah, every now and then that just doesn't happen. Okay, so I'm going to skip that paragraph because I'm not sure what that was supposed to be. Anyways, trying to get my thought back here. If a person has no one that they are answering to, they're going to do whatever they want. The riots and all those things, sorts of things that are going on, you know why that's happening and continues to happen? Because right now they know they can do it and there won't be any punishment. Nothing is being enforced. No one is enforcing it. No one is judging them. When no one is enforcing the rules, we do whatever we want. It ought to cause us to change as Christians the things we do, knowing that God is our judge. Our kids will act up if they know mom or dad are watching them. Dad aren't watching, if they're out of the room or whatever, you know, maybe then the kid thinks, well, I can get away with something, but when mom and dad are standing over the top of the kid, you know, it normally changes the things that they're going to do. God is watching. He sees the secret thing and judges on it. It should change the things we do. God's the answer because he's the judge. God's the answer because God gives a purpose. It says that in verse 3, let us hear the conclusion. I don't have to have a purposeless life. I'm a person that likes a purpose, a goal. I've always been a goal-oriented person. Any task, and I just do this to myself, any task that I have, I set a timeline for myself of when I want it done or when I'd like to have it accomplished. And because I know me, if I have a goal, I'll work as hard as it takes to finish that goal. It's how I work. I like to make goals. I like having a plan. I like having a purpose with God. I don't live a purposeless life. He gives me a purpose. He gives me a job. God is the answer, lastly, because God is the conclusion. After Solomon spends this entire time talking about what human reasoning and worldly wisdom tells you, he changes that by saying, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter, fear God.
Yes.
The conclusion to our worldly wisdom and our human reasoning is God. And I understand he goes into, he's not specifically saying, calling God the conclusion, but the conclusion that Solomon comes to is God is the answer to all of these questions. God is the answer to all of the questions that human reasoning comes up with. Revelation, God says, I'm the first and the last, the beginning and the end, the conclusion. God is the purpose to a purpose or to our purposeless life. He is what fills the emptiness. He is what satisfies. He is our prophet to life. He is the one who gives true wisdom. The conclusion that Solomon comes to after going through all of his human reasoning is simply that God's the answer. And what we see in Ecclesiastes is something that really should speak to every one of us, because we're all very often caught up in our human reasoning. In our, I guess, in our old man way of, and because of it, we get stuck on the negatives, and because of it, we get stuck on the vanity of vanities, and because of it, we get stuck on that there's no profit, and there's no point, and there's no reason, and the conclusion is Christ. The answer is God. We all go through good and bad, highs and lows. I said that in the introduction. We all go through times of pain and times of loss and whatever else we may face. In all of it, the answer is God. I said just a moment ago, to any question human reasoning can come up with, the answer is God, which really just brings a decision to be made. In which will I rely? My human reasoning or my God? Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you'll help us to be able to grasp